Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the first episode of Speedway Soccer in the year 2022. It's been a minute, but we're back and we're ready to get into the swing of things for the new season. We are on the Broadway Sports Media Network. I'm Ben Wright, and I'm joined tonight by Jonathan Slape and Chris Ivey. Gentlemen, how are you doing?
Doing good, doing good. Glad to be back where it is a little bit warmer after my trip to the Great White North.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're
I'm
getting your
doing.
road trips on early, Slape.
Yeah, it was a. So for those who don't, I went up to Hamilton, Ontario for the U.S. versus Canada game on Sunday. Had probably the most Canadian experience of my life on a Saturday night. Pretty much everything in Canada was locked down in Ontario up until Monday, and spent Saturday night with a case of Molson's, some Tim Hortons, and watched Hockey Night in Canada.
That's picture perfect. Chris, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. And it sounds like Slape, he got the balmy weather of the last two qualifiers. I mean, it was what, 20 something degrees. So that's like a Florida winter there.
Yeah, did you even
Yeah.
need a jacket, Slape?
I mean, I wasn't that bundled up. Like I was prepared for. It's like I flew into Buffalo on Friday, but we went up into Hamilton on Saturday, and it was 7 degrees Saturday night, and it actually warmed up. It was definitely, and we're going to get in and talk about this, but it definitely was not the 2 degrees that it was in at Allianz Field in Minnesota last night.
Yeah, so let's just get into that. I think the big takeaway I had is the pictures after the fact of Reggie Cannon's ears just looked absolutely brutal. Um, Thoughts out to him for a speedy recovery. But let's just get into the last round of U.S. World Cup qualifying. Obviously, you had the one nothing win against El Salvador. Then the really just kind of disappointing loss in Canada, and then a bounce back win against Honduras in Minnesota last night in just ungodly temperatures. I guess I'll throw it to you, Chris. Just overall in this window, kind of what are your thoughts of where the U.S. stands, and what were your kind of main takeaways from this last round of games?
Well, where they stand is still in a really good spot. I mean, I think it's very likely that they're going to end up qualifying here in the first two games of the next window. So where they stand is headed to Qatar. I mean, let's be real about it. Unless there's just an epic collapse going forward. My thoughts, little concerned about the offense and the attack still. Just one goal from open play through 3 games that window, despite having home games against both El Salvador and Honduras. Obviously, the set pieces were fired just a night ago. And so that was nice to see. It was good service. Guys get in the box, including Nashville's own Walker Zimmerman scoring that second goal, which is great to see. But I still do have a little bit of concerns about, that final kind of pass or two in the final third and getting that clicking, especially as we go into a harder window next time around with trips at Mexico, at Costa Rica, and at home against a solid Panama side that's going to mean just as much to them as it will to us.
Slape, I mean, obviously, we already touched on this. You were in Canada. How concerning was it for you? I know the other two games the U.S. was expected to win, but how concerning was it to you that Canada just was able to handle them pretty easily?
Yeah, I mean, I was a little concerned going into the game against Canada just for how we were able to attack. Now that being said, Hugo Perez has done a really good job in El Salvador being able to create a compact unit that will sit back and kind of clog up those passing lanes. But even then, you have an El Salvador team at home that has only won 2 games and has given up 13 goals. And it's a little concerning that you weren't able to do much with that, and you really relied on one of your defenders getting back and scoring. And so going into that game, I was expecting a draw. I thought that this Canada team is full of confidence right now, but they don't have Steven Eustáquio, they don't have Alphonso Davies, so I thought this was a good chance of for them to get in. But I think there were some decisions as far as from a tactical standpoint of it was a narrow field and there was a lot of decisions to get the ball out wide when there just wasn't as much space there. And I think one of my biggest frustrations coming out of those first 2 games was the performance of Christian Pulisic, who really struggled. I mean, hit the first half against El Salvador, 30 touches, 15 of those were turned over directly. He wasn't that much better against Canada. And then a set piece delivery, which, we saw what it looks like when you have someone that can take a good free kick last night, which I think this team is really feeling the lack of or absence of a Giovanni Reyna.
Well, and two, just when you have set piece threats like the U.S. does, obviously you want to be able to get the ball into the box on a corner kick and not hit the first man. But I think there's just even more just disappointment in that when you have Walker Zimmerman, Weston McKinney, Miles Robinson, guys like that in the box, and you can't even get the ball to them to give them a chance. I think that was, I mean, obviously against Honduras, that made the difference. All 3 goals came from set pieces. Slape, do you have concerns about just the lack of production from open play?
A little bit, and I think it's we saw basically every striker got their chance against from the start. I'll give Ricardo Pepi a little bit of a pass just because he was not able. He didn't get the service he would probably like, but he was still lively. Try to do something a little bit different with Jesus Ferreira in the first game, and actually, Giassi Zardes in the first 15 minutes against Canada had some really good movement, and I thought was really performing well. But then from there was just an absolute nosedive. I think going into this, I was really disappointed to not see Jordan Pefok. I mean, you have a guy that is scoring. He's up until this window, 7 goals in the last 9 games. He's playing, a team with BSC young boys that is used to playing in this cold. He's playing on turf, and I think a guy of his size was going to be perfect for a game against Canada, where you were going to have a chance to bang some bodies around and really try to make it uncomfortable for the Canadian center backs.
Chris, what's your kind of a lot was made early on in Berhalter's tenure, just of his system, and obviously it's evolved, but I still think there are just a lot of questions about how he sets his team up. What's your kind of takeaway over the last, not just this round of games, but over the last couple? Do you feel like he's changing things? Do you feel like it's evolving, or do you feel like it's static?
I mean, to me, it's just a little too static. I mean, it's not necessarily anything wrong with the system per se. I mean, if those balls just move, a touch quicker, don't dwell on the ball as much, I think it's going to work. But it's that little tweak that's kind of needed in order to break down when you have all these teams sitting down in low blocks against us. You can't dwell, you can't sit. You see other times here in Nashville, especially in that first years, the teams that were able to break down Gary's teams were the ones that moved quickly, moved vertically. And it's the same thing with the U.S. facing these types of teams, is that it's got to be quicker in all phases. And that's going to be part of what opens it up. And I'm with Slape. I would have loved to see Pefok in this window. Until we get an established striker, whoever takes the reins and really makes that position theirs, just ride the hot hand. Whoever's scoring goals for their club team, call them up and let them go for it. I mean, it's not the time to try to get somebody in for them. Just take one of the 6 or 7 guys who are all kind of about on the same level right now, and whichever one's putting the ball in the back of the net, that's who needs to be starting for us.
I think one of my big, not concerns, because I feel like it almost got fixed. One of my big issues with it has just been how he uses his wingers. And I'm not, this could be individual players making decisions in game, but it happens so often that it feels more like an intentional part of the system. But Pulisic especially just always checks to the ball and always comes inside. And when you're going to be playing against a low block against most of these CONCACAF teams, it's counterintuitive. But if your wingers stay wide and really stretch the field, it opens up space. I mean, you see Barcelona and Manchester City do it all the time. And it felt like against Honduras, when you had Weah and Morris who stay wide and really stretch the field, it opened things up a lot more. I'm interested to see if that happens against some of the higher quality teams they're going to play in this next round. There's always a chance that it's just because they were playing the worst team in the octagonal, and it would have happened anyway. But yeah, I think for me, that's one of the big things I'd like to see going forward. What are your guys what do you want to see ideally in the next round of games?
First I am going to address a question we got in the chat.
Let's pull it up.
So Josh Young asks us if we saw any American fans being uncivil at all up there in Canada, making obscene hand gestures, anything like that. I don't know what you're talking about. I did see some guy making some gestures. Don't know who they was. I guess we can tell they were an American fan by the hat they were wearing. But other than that, no comment.
Yeah, fortunately his back was to the camera. So,
but no, like as far as what I want to see in this next window, I want to see more of the MMA midfield. So Musa, Mckinney, Adams. I think that at times in this past window, Mckinney and Musa got a little too far apart from each other, and I think they're able to play like Chris is talking about, seeing them play those quick balls, and I think they can do that. We saw that. We get flashes of that against El Salvador. And some brief flashes against Canada. But when we've seen this team at their best, like against Mexico at home, it's those two guys being closer together and playing those quick balls. And I think that it's really going to come down to who is in form and who's fit. Because as much as I think a lot of fans are saying I want to see Giovanni Reyna. He's been out since the September window. I want to first see what he is doing for Dortmund, and if he's fit and ready to come in. But I think going into the Azteca, the back four that I want to see is I want to see Jedi, I want to see Miles, I want to see Walker, and then the right back spot is kind of up to grads, because I don't know if I necessarily want to take a guy like Serginho Dest, who, as good as he is on the ball in the attack, maybe isn't the best in defense, and I don't know if I want to take him to a hostile atmosphere in Azteca. But I think also that'll depend on how full will the Azteca allowed to be.
Chris, what do you want to see from the last round of games here?
Yeah, so same back line, and I don't think you put Serginho Dest in that game marking Chucky Lozano all day. It's a recipe for disaster. And the last time we saw Yedlin out and him having a great game was in that exact situation, was in a must-win game against Mexico, either him or Reggie Cannon or somebody. But also from that means you can save Serginho Dest for that Panama game, which is arguably more important than picking up any sort of points in the Azteca. So I would do the same. It would be Jedi, Miles, Walker, and then either Yedlin, Cannon, or one of our a little bit more defensive-minded right backs. Same in the midfield. MMA, if they're healthy and ready to go, we saw good success with our athletic midfield against Mexico back in last summer. Not sure who's going to step in for them. I believe Hector Herrera picked up a yellow and is suspended for the match with the U.S., so it'll be interesting to see who steps in there next to Guardado. But I don't see how you can go against those three right now. And then whoever's fit and in form up top, it's like I was saying, that's until we get in kind of an established group up there. The one person I think I want to see no matter what, though, is Timothy Weah. It's no accident that he's been our best offensive threat these last couple of windows, from the standpoint of he is the one guy who has been more direct, more intentional with his play, staying wide, getting to the byline, and it's paid dividends.
I guess just to close it out here, I'm going to make it really easy for you guys. Does the U.S. qualify for the World Cup?
Yes, I like it's not even. I mean, I would put a lot of money down to guarantee. Like if I would say I would play a lot of my money on the line for a U.S. qualification.
Yeah, it would take an epic collapse. Losing at home to Panama in of itself would be disastrous, but then you have to have all those other results go against the U.S., probably, picking up only 1 point at Costa Rica, which has been so-so, though they've turned it on in this last window, and as well as down in Mexico, which they've appeared beatable. They had the draw with Costa Rica and then barely got that late goal against Panama to pick up the 3 points in their last match. So there's points to be had there too. And so it would take quite a lot for them not to qualify at this point.
You say a lot of things would have to go wrong. I'm a little scarred. I'm not going to lie by saying a lot of things have to go wrong, because we've seen that happen before. But I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, it's why it feels like a stupid question to ask, but it also felt like a stupid question to ask in 2017. So I don't want to jinx anything. If I had to put money on it, I would pick them qualifying. And I don't think there's any reason for concern at this point. But yeah, like Slape said, I'm still recovering from that trauma, so I don't want to jinx anything. Guys, unless you have anything else you want to add on the U.S. front, let's just take a brief look around the rest of CONCACAF. Slape, I know you cover CONCACAF as closely as anyone. What are your thoughts of just the rest of the qualifying cycle?
I mean, coming into this window, there was a chance. There really was only a few scenarios that either Canada or the U.S. could qualify. What we were going to see more of was teams getting eliminated. So last Sunday we saw Honduras get eliminated. Last night with the Jamaica loss, they also were eliminated. So I mean, really, we're looking at those last, those top three spots in that fourth one. Costa Rica has been able to find a little bit of form. So just, to really go through where we sit going into this last window. So, Canada is on 25, the U.S. is on 21, above on goal difference with Mexico, who is also on 21, and then Panama on 17 points, and then Costa Rica at 16. So while El Salvador's alive, they're basically only alive in name only. Actually, no, they're officially eliminated as well. So, though there's only the top five are available, doing some bad math. So, I mean, I think it's really going to come down to Costa Rica and Panama for that last spot, because I think Mexico and the U.S. and Canada will be the three that go through. But before, not to dive too much, I think just really it's been I think the takeaway, the qualifying cycle has been the disappointment of Jamaica.
Yeah, especially with all the kind of influx of talent they had from England coming into this cycle, it seemed like they were kind of poised to maybe upset a little bit. Chris, what do you think? Are there any major surprises other than Jamaica?
I think it's got to be Panama. Once again, kind of doing what they need to do to put themselves in the conversation for qualifying. Certainly better than I thought they would do. It's a good team. It's not necessarily one that's just, loaded out with talent. It's like, we all thought Jamaica would probably be that fourth team, but, getting that team to gel, and I know COVID protocols kept some of those guys out earlier in the cycle. So they were certainly a disappointment, but I've been really pleasantly surprised what we've seen from Panama.
I think Panama and Costa Rica, those two are a good contrast between each other. Panama is a younger team. There's still some of those stalwarts that are there, like your Anibal Godoys, but they have done a good job of bringing through some younger talent. Whereas this Costa Rican team, who has started to find its footing a little bit, is a very old team. I mean, your Kendall Watsons, your Brian Ruiz, Brian Oviedo. The team itself is probably the oldest squad out there, and so I think we're seeing some veteran presence that's able to get some results, but will it be enough? Because really, if they don't qualify now, then I mean they're going to be really in for a rough next round. Luckily, it's an expanded World Cup where the U.S., Mexico, and Canada look to already automatically qualify.
Excuse me. Still recovering from COVID. Let's move on here from the U.S. and get into kind of, I guess, we don't have much information, and we won't have much information on Nashville SC's preseason, but they will be playing preseason games. They had to cancel one, so kind of echoes of last year, although not for the same reasons. They were not able to secure an opponent for their January 28th game, so they ended up playing just a closed-door scrimmage between the squad. They have a match on the schedule for Charlotte on February 8th. We're supposed to play another one on February 12th, and according to Gary Smith earlier this week, it does not seem like they're going to be able to get an opponent set for that one. And then they'll close off with games against Cincinnati and Philadelphia Union. There's no stream. We're not going to have anybody on the ground in Florida to cover these, so there's not going to really be a ton of meaningful information we can get from this. But Chris, is there anything that you're looking for from preseason? Any information that you're looking at that can potentially help us figure out where this team stands?
I mean, I think the only thing I'm going to end up really looking for each time that they announce, lineups for each of these preseason games is who is Ake Loba paired with? Because I think that's going to be the real barometer of, does he start the season at the striker position, or is it CJ Saparms still to go? So I'd like to see him paired with Hani. If that's the case, I think it bodes well that Loba may be winning that job. If it's still Hani and CJ, then it may be Gary Smith indicating that Loba still has more work to do to take over that position.
Yeah, and kind of along those lines, talking to Gary, I believe it was on Monday, he said that the last two games, they've typically broken them down into 30-minute segments. They've kind of done away with that. Even the intra-squad scrimmages are 45-minute halves. I believe their match against Charlotte is going to be 2 45-minute halves, and then they're actually going to go 120 minutes against both Cincinnati and Philadelphia. And Gary said that he is expecting, as the games go on, it's going to be closer and closer to what he would call a first-choice lineup, and that he's hoping to get kind of his core group of guys playing 70 to 90 minutes. So I think by the time that that game against Philadelphia comes around, we should have a pretty good idea of at least where things are going to stand on February 27th. Slape, are there any kind of partnerships that you think are still up for grabs, or do you feel like, at least on paper, the lineup kind of picks itself?
I mean, I think on paper, in my mind, on paper, I think the lineup picks itself. But I think probably the big ones that we're going to look at is the center midfielding pairing. In my mind, I think it's pretty clear that it's Sean Davis and Anibal Godoy, but I don't know if Gary is going to sit or leave Dax McCarty as a sub coming off to start the season. That's just where I would go in my mind. And then up top is, of course, what he does at with the forward. And I really think that if Loba is not starting to start the season, I think it's we have to ask some real questions of how this team is and how this staff is identifying talent and bringing them through, and are they identifying the right people? Because this would just be another instance of a designated player that we're spending a lot of money on not coming in and hitting the ground running. And so I think there will be some questions that need to be asked. And I think finally the last thing I'm looking at is what is he doing at right fullback? Is he starting Donald Hall's favorite player, Eric Miller? Do we see Alex Moyle move back, who I think is tailor-made for a right wing back position in a Gary Smith team? But those are really the three areas of the field that I'm looking at for as we get closer and closer to the start of the season.
Donald, we missed you too. Shout out to the dogs. Yeah, I think right fullback, I'm honestly surprised it took us this long to mention it. I think that's kind of the glaring hole in the roster right now. Obviously, they traded Alistair Johnston for $1 million in allocation money. I think all of us agree that it was kind of a no-brainer trade. As good as Johnson has been for Nashville, when you're offered that kind of money, you take it. But it leaves a question mark for Nashville. Slape, what were you going to?
I was going to say is, does that trade look as good as it does now? After we've seen the amount of GAM that has been traded through the continuation of the offseason, because I think at the start, in my opinion, I think at the start of the window, I think that looked like a great trade. Now it looks like a decent to okay trade, because I think Alistair Johnson is worth more than that $1 million in general allocation money. That to be said, Nashville does have a sell-on clause, so that is a part of it. But when you see a guy like Sebastian Lletget go for not Sebastian Lletget, Paul Arriola, they're the same person. Paul Arriola go for $2 million in GAM. You see $1.5 million for Kellen Acosta. There's a lot of guys. $1 million in GAM ain't what it used to be.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I think when he was initially traded, I think the comparable trade was Tristan Blackman, who I believe went for $450.
Yeah, $450 in allocation.
And that felt like kind of, at that point, at $450 seemed like a fairly decent valuation for Johnston, maybe a little bit more. So in my mind, it felt like they were getting 500, 600,000 over asking price. I still think they probably got more for him Not to say that he deserved, because he's a good player, and I think you've seen what he does for Canada. But I think Montreal probably overpaid to some extent. I think it looks a little bit worse now that you've seen these other trades. But I mean, Areola was a DP in DC. Kellen Acosta has been kind of one of the elite midfielders in MLS. I mean, I know he had a rough couple years, but he's bounced back, and I think he's one of the biggest performers. I think a lot of it depends on how Johnston performs in more of a full-time right center back role, because I don't think you saw the best from him in Nashville out on the right. And I think if he can play like he is for the Canadian national team for Montreal, I think it'll look worse and worse for Nashville. Either way, you're sitting with about less than a month to go before the season starts, and you have pretty big questions about right back. I think Eric Miller is a good replacement option. I don't think he can be a starter for 34 games at the level that Nashville wants to be. I mean, they're wanting to finish top 4 in the West. Alex Mule, I think, has potential there, but at the same time, I mean, Gary Smith played Eric Miller ahead of him in the playoffs, and I don't think that. I think that probably says something about where he rates them. I think Donaciano is an interesting option, because when he was drafted last year, all the talk was that he was drafted kind of with an eye to the future, with Johnston potentially being gone on international duty. He could fill in at right back. Didn't really play much, went on loan in the USL and immediately got hurt. So essentially didn't play from the end of August on. I want to see how the lineups look in preseason with him, because if he's getting minutes at right back, I think he could have some upside there. Otherwise, regardless, I think you're still looking for a trade option. I think it just depends on if you're looking for a starting right back, or if you're just looking for more depth. Chris, it doesn't look like Shaq Moore is going to happen at least until the summer, correct?
Yeah, so that ship sailed. So I've got to imagine that's kind of what Mike Jacobs had in mind, was landing Shaq Moore. And at least from the reports that came out of Spain these last week or two, is that Nashville put in a serious bid for Shaq Moore. Indications from reporters there that it would take about $1 million to pry Shaq Moore from Tenerife. We don't know how much Nashville bid, or really direct confirmation that it was indeed them. But I think that it made a lot of sense to go after Shaq Moore. Unfortunately, Tenerife didn't have a backup for him in order to plug in. They're in the middle of a promotion race, so they weren't eager to let him go. So I think that's kind of what Jacobs and Gary Smith had in mind for plugging that hole at the right wing back position. Now the question is, do you go out and make a trade that kind of gets you through this season, or do you roll with Alex Mule and Eric Miller for the first half of the year until you make a renewed bid for someone like Shaq Moore? Or there will be plenty of other people available in the summer window when there's going to be a lot more transfers happening. So that is certainly going to be interesting. You know, is there a trade or another move to be made in this last couple of weeks before the season starts, or do they roll with what they've got?
I think the one interesting factor for me, obviously Shaq Moore. I mean, Nashville could still acquire him theoretically, because the MLS transfer window to bring in players lasts a lot longer than the European window. There's always a chance that Nashville could go out and find another team who has more right back depth and aren't opposed to selling a player. I think the issue, like you said, with Shaq Moore is that they just didn't have a replacement option for him. I think the one other question I have, and you guys tell me if you think this is crazy, do you think Nashville stay with the back three to go into next year with they brought in a guy like Teal Bunbury who can play on the wings. You've seen Ake Loba play on the wings. And you could potentially, if you don't want to drop CJ Sapong or Hani Mukhtar, you could fit him on the wings. Even a guy, Gary, on Monday just name-checked Handwala Bwana as one of the standouts in preseason. And he's certainly in need of a bounce back. Do you think we'll see... it's not going to be... Either way, it's not going to be exclusively one or the other. But are you expecting to see kind of more of that 4-4-1-1 mixed in? Or do you think the back three is kind of here to stay?
I mean, I think that, we've heard Gary and co talk about how highly they rate Jack Mayer. And I think that it's the back three is the best way you can get Mayer, Walker, and
Romney.
And I am just having a time right now.
Dave Romney.
Dave Romney. Dave misses 2 games, and I just forget his name. But I think you seeing those 3 back there. I mean, those are Nashville's best 3 defenders, and unless you're looking at a rotation standpoint, but we know that this season is not going to be as compressed. So I think we're probably going to see them roll with that 3-back set to get those guys on the field. Now, maybe if we see an injury to one of those 3, I wouldn't be surprised to see of movement back into a that 4-4-1-1. But I also think the back 3 got the best out of Hani Mukhtar.
Yeah.
And that two forward setup, I think it provides a little bit different than a 4-4-1-1 kind of hybrid that we've seen. It allows them to have some support from behind, like from a guy like Randall Leal, where they're able to feed both Hani and CJ, or hopefully this year Hani and Loba together. And I think that just gets the best out of it. But like you said, I mean, there's some new personnel, and we'll see what maybe Handwalla Bwana becomes a brand new right-sided wingback.
That would be quite the 180 for him. We have a couple minutes left here. I'm just going to hit you guys with actually here. Let's see what we got here. We got this comment from Josh here. Legit wonder if the first half in Cincinnati is the last time we see Gary play a back 4.
I think you'll see it at some point this year.
I mean, he's gone on record saying that he calls it the 4-4-2, but that system that he played to start 2020, he's said it's his preferred formation. I think we'll see it at some point, but I think that point you made was spot on. It brings the best out of Hani Mukhtar, and you can't afford Hani Mukhtar to not be at his best in this team. I'm going to hit you guys with an impromptu question. Obviously, the season's still about 3 weeks away, and we'll have plenty of podcasts between now and then. But if you had to, if you're sitting here on February 26th and you have to pick your starting lineup for Nashville, what does that look like right now? I'll throw it to Slape first.
I mean, I'm going with a 3-4-1-2. It's Romney, Walker, Mayer, of course, Joe Willis in goal, Lovitz and Moyle on the wings, with Sean Davis and Anibal Godoy in the middle, with Randall Leal sitting advanced of those 2 and right behind Mukhtar and Loba.
I think the one change I would make is I think Dax will get that first start in the middle. I think it's not long before Sean Davis probably becomes the more often starter in that midfield pair. But I think out of deference to the captain, Gary's going to give it to Dax. And we've always seen Gary is slow about integrating players. I have to imagine Sean Davis is going to be the same way.
Yeah, I think Sean Davis is going to start. But I'm also not convinced that Gary is going to drop McCarty. So I'm interested to see how. I think that's going to be one of the more interesting things at the start of the season, to see how he integrates those. I wouldn't be surprised if he just kind of chops and changes a little bit to start. I don't think you have to really worry about Dax and Godoy's pairing, just because they're so rock solid together. And I think you need to get Davis up and running quickly. Just with that, they're going to be playing in Open Cup, they're going to be playing in Leagues Cup. I think you need that midfielder up and running quickly. And I think for me, I would still start Eric Miller at right wing back if I had to pick today. And I just go back to the fact that Gary Smith played Alex Muil centrally instead of putting him out wide, and that in the playoffs, when he needed a right wing back, he went with Eric Miller. I think that's the latest kind of data point that we have on those 2, and I think it's a pretty significant one. And so I think until proven otherwise, I think Eric Miller is the starter at right wing back.
I mean, I want to be very clear. I was going with what Jonathan would do. I was not going with what Gary Smith would do. You're right. I agree with you. But I'm just saying that is what I would do in my. And I know as we're wrapping up, and there's been some transfers. Just impromptu question. What was the wild? We saw a lot of transfers of MLS players going abroad. Wildest transfer that you guys saw, or biggest story coming out of the January window in Europe revolving around MLS players?
Oh man, I mean, I think Ricardo Pepi is the big one. He's not super wild. Does it have to be going to Europe, or can it be coming into MLS?
It could be coming into MLS.
Douglas Costa.
Oh yeah, I mean Douglas Costa is a pretty
Insigne. Although he's not coming until the summer. I mean, that is arguably top 3 biggest moves in MLS history.
Right,
incomers.
Yeah, I think the thing with him is I think he's going to be fantastic. I think he's going to be an absolute success. I think for LA Galaxy, Douglas Costa has not been Douglas Costa for 2.5 years, and it's just they need production pretty quickly. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how he does, because I have some concerns about him. But yeah, Chris, Insigne is going to be fantastic, and if they bring in Sebastian Giovinco too, I mean, Toronto's going to be a fun team to watch this year.
Giovinco is training with them in the offseason. Like, we know he's there. So it's just a matter of how they can structure that contract. There's talks of Velotti as well. So, I mean, we'll see. I mean, I think for me, it's the fact that we didn't see Tati Castellanos go abroad when that was kind of talked about at the, right after NYCFC winning the MLS Cup. And, just leading up to it was like, this is the time where Castellanos is going to go abroad and wants to make the move to Europe. The window's come and gone, and he hasn't moved. I mean, there's a chance that he goes, back to South America, but I think that he wants to make that move further forward. And I think the other one that was the biggest surprise was Austin Trusty to Arsenal.
Yeah, yes, I know that nowhere,
out of absolutely nowhere. I know that there's same ownership between the Rapids and Arsenal, but like that was just one where there was like, I was following transfer deadline day, and I was like, wow, that is not something that I, even in my wildest football manager like that, I never thought I would see. Like, I mean, and it's not to say he's a bad player; it's just a surprising move.
I got the email in my inbox, and I did a double take because I think there's a team in Chile called Arsenal, and I had to look up to make sure it wasn't that Arsenal. It kind of felt like, in FIFA career mode, when they would give you an assignment to like sign a player of a certain nationality.
Mm-hmm.
It felt a little bit like that. I don't know. I hope it doesn't turn out like Miazga or Eric Palmer Brown, where he technically goes and then gets loaned out. I mean, I think he's a good player, but yeah, that caught me off guard for sure.
Yeah, Andy's Arsenal piling it up with MLS players.
It could just be Kroenke trying to cook the books on his own teams.
Do you think Kroenke realizes he owns the Colorado Rapids? I'm not so sure he knows he owns Arsenal.
I definitely don't think he has any clue what game is.
I would pay money to get him to explain MLS roster rules to me, or attempt to explain like even the basic MLS roster rules.
We should get him on the podcast.
I'll try. I mean, what's word? We'll just ask him like, "Hey, you want to come on the podcast?" We'll send a media request.
All right, guys. I don't have anything else. Do either of you have anything you want to hit on before we head out here?
No, nothing on my side. I know we'll preview, once we get close to the season. Looking forward to the Western Conference and the new things that brings. But no, nothing else right now.
Yeah, well, we're going to try to do this more regularly. The winter was a little bit crazy for all of us for all kinds of reasons, but I think we're back and we're going to do this more regularly. Like Slape said, once we hit some more of the preseason games, there's not a ton of information that we'll get from them, but we can at least talk lineups and imagine what we think happened in those games. Until then, you can always check out Broadway Sports Media for all the latest Nashville soccer news and Nashville sports news. Chris has been doing a bunch of deep dives into roster building, and we're getting all the Nashville news up as it comes out. We also have merchandise for the first time ever in Speedway Soccer history. I have a hoodie on right now. Chris, do you have the Coyote? Yeah, the Up the Yotes t-shirt. We're going to be pushing that hard. So check that out. And then, as always, this will be podcasted shortly. You can find that wherever you get your podcast. And if you would subscribe, rate, and review, that just helps more people get this. Slape, give your shameless plug here.
Yeah, so shameless plug. I help do another podcast called World of CONCACAF, where we preview and review all of the craziness in CONCACAF. We talk about all the nations throughout CONCACAF. we will have another episode next week talking about this window, and also first time all three of us made it to an away game, and then the other two members made it to the other game. So we'll you want to hear what it was like in 2-degree weather in Minnesota? Check out World of CONCACAF.
Yeah, the Grant Wall episode was fun. And the segment, what's the segment you guys have? The real or fake team?
Yeah, so yeah, real team, fake team. So when we do our laser focuses, we give our guests a chance to decide if it is a real team or fake team in the nations that we're talking about and previewing.
Yeah, it's really fun. I definitely recommend it. Chris, anything you want to plug?
No, nothing to plug, but ready for Nashville to get back and to have MLS soccer here in just 3 weeks.
Yeah, it is coming quickly, and before you know it, we're going to be in the new stadium. I can't wait. Guys, until then, this has been Speedway Soccer. Thanks to everybody for listening, and we'll be back soon with more content.
Never go full shepherd.
Nope.